Getting back to this idea of an appeal, do you see any avenues?
Yeah, and just like what Lee said, the judge was extremely careful to make sure that they didn't have room for appeal, because judges in these types of cases, especially high-profile cases, they want to make sure that they don't leave any room for the purposes of appeal, to make sure their rulings kind of side with the defense and make sure that they're well within the realms of the law, to make sure that if he gets convicted, that he can't appeal. And he has a long road ahead of him. I'm sure that his lawyers are looking into the jurors' conduct to make sure that they didn't write anything on Twitter or Facebook or say anything to anyone. That's their next step. Is their long shot is to see if the jurors did anything improper, which could easily get it back before another trial.
I just want our director to put up the 4-box, and there it is. Show of hands. Who is shocked at this conviction?
I'll say I was kinda.
That's a half of a hand. Go ahead, Eric.
I was kind of shocked because they didn't have a motive. They didn't have a murder weapon. They threw everything into the pot to try to get something to stick, and the jury was out for a week, which is a very long time in this type of case, although it tried over several months. Yeah. Some jurors back there were not convinced when they started deliberating, so I'd be interested to see if the jurors talk about what happened in the deliberations.
But when you heard his mother and his sister get up there and describe what kind of a hardworking man he was, I think that really brings, it just brings the impact of what has been lost here.
Yeah, and that is one of the hardest parts for a defense lawyer, because when you look at a mother's eyes or a wife's eyes and look and hear their stories about what they're missing, the love that they have for this person who's deceased, it brings the reality back to us. Because as defense lawyers, we have to kind of separate it. It's hard to describe, but we have to separate it and compartmentalize those emotions to make sure we can concentrate on the case itself and not the violence associated with it or the person who's deceased. But the victim impact statement, that brings it all home to us at the end of any case. To hear that. It's a very sad point in our careers and in any type of trial for us.
Eric Guster, Doug Burns, Lise Wheel, thanks for joining us in our coverage today. The guilty verdict of Aaron Hernandez. Back with more happening now.
Eric? Yeah, and this being a circumstantial case, just like Faith said, it was a very tough case for the prosecution. I've defended people with circumstantial cases, and we as defense lawyers just hope that we can reach 1 or 2 jurors as holdouts, which I thought was going to be a hung jury. I did not think they would get a conviction. But the key piece of evidence in this case were the shell casing with the gum on it, which put him at the scene, which caused the defense attorneys to have to say that he was there, and then the video of at his house with him having a gun on him. So that you have him at the scene of a crime with a shell casing with his gum on it, as well as a pistol on his person on video.
But 7 days, Eric?
7 days, but the trial lasted for months.
Right.
So I did not necessarily expect it to be a very short deliberations, but when you have a mountain of evidence, they put hundreds of exhibits in, dozens of witnesses, and the jurors had to go through each one of those and discuss those things. So, like I said, I was shocked that it was a guilty verdict, especially when the time started ticking, day 1, 2 through 7. Right. I thought it was going to be at least hung, not necessarily not guilty, but the prosecutors did a very good job piecing it together.
Now, would you have put him on the stand, especially knowing the defense attorney admitted he was at the crime scene?
That's a tough question, and that's one of the toughest decisions as a defense lawyer to make. Well, it's actually the defendant's choice to take the stand or not, but as a team to decide whether a person takes a stand, it's very tough, because under cross-examination, people will break down and he will admit things, and the other things will go into evidence, prior acts and 404B evidence. They will come into evidence and really sink him a lot quicker than what happened here.
Expected a hung jury. We know there was no murder weapon found. There was no independent eyewitness to the murder of Mr. Lloyd. Why were you so surprised?
Well, it was such a circumstantial case. You have a very rich guy. There is no motive. He's a good-looking guy, which goes into play with the jury. And they just seem like they had to put these pieces together, and they may not have had it. And the jury was out for almost 7 days, which, as a defense lawyer, we want the jury out for a very long time because that indicates that they're thinking about things. And he may have had 1 or 2 people back there who were on his side with the evidence.
So what do you think swayed them? What about the prosecution's case won them over in the end?
There are a few pieces. Number one, his DNA on the gum at the scene. You can't get away from that. Secondly, the video with him holding a gun in his house, you can't get away from that. So you have DNA at the scene, on the shell casing, and him holding a gun at home. Those 2 pieces connect him to the place and a weapon. So I think that's what really hurt him, as well as Kraft, when Aaron Hernandez was giving his alibi, which when I heard Kraft testify, I thought he was sunk. I mean, he was sunk like a bag of rocks, because people start talking too much when they're in trouble, and they try to talk their way out of things, and defendants try to set up their alibi, and that's what he was trying to do. He was talking too much.
And so now,
this is background. I had a former member of the New England Patriots tell me recently, had he been drafted by Seattle, he'd still be playing, but he brought his neighborhood in Bristol to Boston with him.
Right.
Yeah.
They just moved up
and when these kids can't get rid of their old habits, their old friends, that's where they go down. This is downward spiral from there.
Eric, great to have you with us this morning.
Thank you
for your insight.
Thank you so
Brian
much,
Jackman,
Eric.
great to see you, man.
You too, guys.
All right,
Thank
take care.
you.
We'll talk to you again soon.